Ladies and gentlemen, g'day. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Economics Mate. This is WOT Tank Blitz. And if you're new to this channel, thank you so much for dropping by. And if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing if you like what you see. In today's video, as the title suggests, we are going to be talking about the top 5 must-have tank destroyers in your garage. These are going to be my top 5 based on my opinions and what I like, and also based on the statistics of the tank and how I think the strengths and weaknesses, or rather how the strengths outweigh the weaknesses. So yeah, these are going to be my 5 picks basically for tank destroyers that I believe every player should have. Now, obviously, we're not going to be starting off with the Waffentrager Alpha 100. As fun as this gun is, the 150mm gun is, yeah, I would not consider this to be in the top 5. But without further ado, let us get right into the video. I'm not going to bore you guys with gameplay. Instead, what I'm going to do is going to bore you guys with statistics. Now, I'm going to go through very briefly the statistics of the tank and why I think these are going to be my picks. All right, so here we go. Strap yourselves in. Coming in at number 5, it's this little number here, the Object 268. This is the classic quintessential tank destroyer. This has been in the game very much since its inception, essentially. It is one of the oldest tank destroyers at T10 in the game. It's always been an interesting tank in the sense that it obviously dealt big damage. It had very good pen, it had good mobility, it had good armor, it had good dispersion, it had good amount of gun depression, all that kind of stuff. Everything that made a good tank destroyer made this tank the way it is. Now, Wargaming have nerfed this tank and they buffed it over the years, and in its current state, people are saying that, oh, you know, it's not as good as it used to be, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to prove to you why I think the 268 that we have right now is as good as it'll ever be. You ready for this? So, obviously, most tank destroyers that have a 152mm gun, or a 150mm gun, or a 155mm gun usually do about 640 alpha. Yes? Well, this thing right here does 690 alpha on its AP rounds. On its APCR, or rather, sorry, its heat rounds, not APCR, my bad. On its heat rounds, it does 590 damage. 590 damage. And on top of that, on its HE, it's 1000. So on a normal 152 or a 155 or a 150mm gun elsewhere, usually the damage output is about 640, right? And your HE would be about 960. Guess what? On this thing, your HE is over 1000, which means if you high roll, you can probably potentially do up to 1200 damage with a HE round. That is borderline 183 territory with Hesh. That's insane when you think about it. It's crazy, right? And for the tank to do just under 700 damage per shot, and you're doing that basically every 15 seconds, it's pretty crazy indeed. And on top of that, you have 7 degrees of gun depression. Now, it's nothing to cry home about, but 7 degrees of gun depression is better than having barely any gun depression. And not to mention, it's got decent accuracy. It's not the best, but it's got decent accuracy. 4-second aim time. Again, not amazing, but pretty good. But the dispersion is where it's at. At 0.293 dispersion, especially considering what I've got running on the tank right now in equipment, it is really, really good. I mean, the tank itself is pretty devastating. 178 mils on the front of the hull, 104 on the sides. And it's kind of maneuverable, 48 kilometer per hour top speed. The biggest thing about this thing, though, is the pen. The penetration on this thing is insane. If you run calibrated shells with this tank, which I 100% recommend you do, have a look at the penetration values. Look at that. Can you see what I'm seeing? 319 mils of AP penetration. What that means is, because you're equipping calibrated shells, you get an extra 24 mils of pen. On your heat, you got 418 mils of pen on your heat, which I'm pretty sure makes it the highest penetrating round in the game, apart from maybe the Jaegeru. Other than that, it's pretty crazy. 418 mils. If you're running this with calibrated shells, you get an extra 48 mils. So that is basically over 450 millimeters of heat pen. It's absolutely insane. And on your HE, you get 97 as standard. If you add in the, the 7, you get yourself, over 100 mils of HE pen. It's crazy. It's crazy. I just want to check something. If I run it with RAM, I just want to make sure, I want to fact check myself and I'm not losing my mind. Okay. All right. So, as it turns out, I was wrong. Let me reiterate what I was saying. It turns out I was wrong. Let me reiterate. Okay. Let's backtrack. What it shows here, this is the normal penetration. 90 mils, 370 on your heat, 295 on your AP. If you're running this with calibrated shells, it's going to show you what it's going to look like after you've run it. Okay, cool. Sorry, my bad. Every time I do these, I do the same kind of mistake where I'm thinking that it is what it is. Anyway, my point is, look at the penetration values. Look at the AP damage and the HE damage. The tank itself is really cool, and it's a very good tank. As a tank destroyer, it is quintessentially what you need in a tank destroyer at T10. Yes, I know people might say, oh, but I'm just going to choose WZ-113 GFT because it's just better. Armor-wise, yes, but everything else, this tank is just supremely better. And that's why it's my top 5. That's why it's my 5th pick. All right, coming in at number 4 is the T30. The T30, obviously, as you know, is a turreted tank destroyer at T9. It's an American turreted tank destroyer at T9. And it is, well, there's no other word to put it. Chef's kiss. Boy, oh boy, do I absolutely love this tank. This is honestly one of my favorite tanks to play in the game. And, oh, look at that. It's got a cool camouflage. I don't really like these sort of camouflages on these tanks, but for the sake of having something, I'll just have this on the tank. It is a very, very good tank. This is basically a heavy tank in tank destroyer form. That's what it is. A tank destroyer as a heavy tank. You run this thing hull down using your gun, your 10 degrees of gun depression, and the gun just sings. It really does. Have a look at the turret armor, by the way. 279 mils on the front of the turret. The hull is not going to bounce anything. Don't bother trying to bounce anything with your hull. Your turret is where it's at. Your turret armor is very, very strong. And you need to use that to your advantage by going on hills and ridgelines and making sure that you use your turret to your full advantage. It's got a 155mm gun. You do 640 alpha, as I was saying previously, and 960 on your HE. Right, you got 259 mils of pen as standard on your AP and 310 on your APCR and 90 on your HE. Obviously, I would recommend running calibrated shells because you're going to need that extra bit of pen. Okay, the aim time is pretty abysmal, 5.1 seconds. The dispersion, 0.374 dispersion, not the best. You do have to aim in your shots, but when it works, it works. And have a look, right, at the gun depression. 10 degrees of gun depression is just amazing, especially when you're using your full gun depression, those 10 degrees with your turret on a ridgeline, and you're just bouncing shots left, right, and center. It really is awesome, this thing. It's just cool. It's old school cool. Now, running this with calibrated shells, have a look. As you can see, 280 mils on AP, 326 on your APCR, and 97 on your HE. By doing this, you kind of guarantee yourself that you'll be able to hit those HE shots a lot better than you would if you had your 90 mils of pen. And what that means is you'll be able to do your 960 alpha plus on very lightly armored tanks. And that's what you want. That's what you want in a tank like this, especially going on a ridgeline and using your gun depression to sort of get to that position. So that would be my advice if you're playing this thing. Otherwise, it's just a cool tank. It is old school cool. Again, this is one of the oldest T9 tank destroyers in the game. And it's just such a good tank to play. It's so much fun. It's very, very much a all-rounder good tank. You got to play it like a heavy tank. Can't play it like a tank destroyer. And that's my number 4 pick. Coming in at number 3. It's the Waffentrager of Panzer IV. This, in my opinion, is the best all-rounder tank destroyer in T9. It really is. This is just such a versatile vehicle. You can play this thing as a light tank, you can play it as a tank destroyer, or a second line tank destroyer, or a second line light tank, and you can just sing. And preferably, I like to run this thing with the 150mm gun, because it's just better in every way. It's just awesome. It's cool. It's great. It doesn't have any armor, so don't expect to bounce anything at all or not be absorbed by HE. So that's that. The mobility is not bad, but it's got a T5 engine, which is quite crap. And as a result, your top speed is 40 kilometers per hour. But the problem is that by getting there, it's not as maneuverable as people might think, considering it doesn't weigh much. But the gun is where it's at. 4.3 second aim time, 0.364 dispersion. Again, not terrible values, but not bad at all. 2400 DPM. Again, you can probably bounce that up a little bit by running double rations. And like a 14-second reload, basically. Again, if you're running calibrated shells, which I would highly recommend, as standard, you're getting 255 mils of AP pen, 334 mils of heat pen, and 85 on your HE. So, as standard, you technically have more penetration than you do on your T30, which is interesting to see. But yeah, 85 mils of HE pen, definitely want to run this with calibrated shells, because it means that your high explosive, your heat, is just going to go up tenfold. Now, I know it's a 150mm gun, but it only does 580 alpha damage, which is not good. It's basically been nerfed. So previously, the tank did 640 alpha damage because it was a 150mm gun. And then Wargaming decided to nerf the bloody alpha damage and give it 580 alpha instead of 640. And as a result, because it's 580 now, on your heat you're doing 490, and on your high explosive you're only doing 890. So there's less of a chance that you're going to be able to, do as much damage as you used to be. But it's still a very fun tank and very versatile. Now, it does have 10 degrees of gun depression. Technically, it's got 10 degrees of gun depression, but it's only got 10 degrees of gun depression on the rear side of the tank, this area here where it doesn't have the engine deck. On the front of the engine deck, I'm pretty sure it's got like 6 or 7, maybe 8 degrees of gun depression. So you get an extra 2 if you move the turret backwards. So yeah, that would be my pick, 100%. See, running this with calibrated shells, have a look at that. 275 mils of AP pen and 377 on your heat is pretty crazy. And getting 92 mils of HE pen is more than enough to deal with a lot of targets. That especially lightly armored medium tanks on the sides, it's just great. This is my number 3 pick. If you disagree with me, tell me in the comments down below why you disagree with me. Coming in number 2, my bad. Coming in at number 2, it's the SU-130 PM. This, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best, tank destroyers at tier 8. Now, Mr. GrandMcLegend, my good friend, seems to think that the Scorpion G is better than the SU-130 PM. Wrong. The SU-130 PM is the better tank. It's just better in every way. I've made videos on both the Scorpion G and the SU-130 PM. And again, like I said, the SU-130 PM just performs better. It's more versatile. It's more tough. You can bounce. There's like an auto ricochet area on the front of this tank that if you hit it, you're going to bounce shots. It's incredible. I've had bounce shots from tank destroyers. It's insane. It is just it's such a fun tank. It's so funky looking. The gun is amazing. The tank itself has no armor, but look at the gun. It's a 130mm gun, right? 3.7 second aim time, 0.326 dispersion. Not incredible values, but a lot better than you may think. 2300 DPM, 11.79 second reload. You can probably bump it down to like 11 seconds if you're running this with full provisions. Again, it's just so fun. It's so much fun. Just look at the pen. 265 mils of AP pen, high explosive anti-tank, 359 mils. And that's because I am running calibrated shells. 70 mils of HE pen is fantastic. Have a look at this. Fantastic, right? it's just the gun itself is just so good. It's got so much pen. It's great. 460 alpha shots on your AP. You know, you're doing 390 on your heat. You're doing 600 on your HE. The tank is just so much fun. 7 degrees of gun depression, which is very, very nice. Obviously, the only drawback on this thing is that it does not traverse the turret fully. So do keep that in mind. But I mean, realistically speaking, it's just, you can play this thing in so many different positions. Seriously. It's just so versatile. So versatile as a tank destroyer. You can play it as a second line, light tank, a tank destroyer, whatever you want it to be, it'll be. It's a great tank, honestly. This is one of the ones that I would recommend buying if you ever get a chance to. I know I tried to keep it sort of tech tree, you know, based, but like there's no denying this is one of the best, if not the best tank destroyers you can buy from like auctions and like from the store and whatnot. So that's my number 2 pick, the SU-130 PM. Here are some honorable mentions. The ISU-130, I think, is absolutely fantastic. It really is an amazing tank, especially considering you have that AP round, the premium AP that has less pen but does more damage. It's a great gun. The gun on this thing is just amazing. And then when you're running it with tungsten and with adrenaline, it becomes this super strong tank destroyer that can do as much damage as the ISU-152, which would have been a pick of mine if the ISU-130 didn't exist. I personally think this tank is better than the ISU-152, in my opinion. I feel like the ISU-152 is just sort of, it's not relevant anymore. No one plays it as much as they used to because it's just not as good in this current meta. It doesn't have barely any hit points. The gun is super troll. It's still fun, but it's just, I'd rather play this. Well, if I'm honest with you, I'd probably rather just play the SU-130 PM, to be honest with you. But yeah, honorable mention is the ISU-130. Another honorable mention would be the Scorpion G. Yeah. You happy there, GrandMcLegend? Yes, the Scorpion G is definitely a tank destroyer that I would highly recommend getting as well. It is very, very good, but the SU-130 PM is better, and you can't change my mind. And that's why it's on my list, and not this tank. Again, very, very good tank, amazing tank, love it, love it, love it, but I prefer playing the SU-130 PM more so than this one, and hence why that's on my list, and this isn't on my list, but it is in my honorable mentions. And of course, you can't have an honorable mentions for tank destroyers without talking about the T95. Come on, this is one of my favorite tanks in the game in general, but I wouldn't recommend, you know, researching it, or not like research, but like, I wouldn't recommend putting it on this list, mainly because it's just not the playstyle for most people, okay? It's big, it's slow, it's heavy, right? But it's got all the armor in the world, it's got an amazing gun, it's just so much fun to play. I really enjoy playing it. It's, again, one of my favorite tanks in the game, but I don't think it's worthy of being in my top 5 tank destroyer list, hence the reason why it's in my honorable mentions. But I mean, if you have to have one, you have to have one. It's such a meme tank, and yeah, it's in my honorable mentions. And finally, the last tank in my honorable mentions list is the SU-152. This is still, to this day, one of the most fun tank destroyers that you can play at tier 7. This 150mm gun is just such a troll gun. It's such a meme tank, right? And coupled with this camouflage, this legendary camouflage, it looks awesome. It looks so cool. It's so much fun to bully heavy tanks, especially tier 8 heavy tanks that you can pan with your heat, and you're just dishing out massive amounts of damage. Or if you're playing against tier 6 tanks, you just basically delete a light tank from full health. Yes, a KV2 can do it, but this has more pen than a KV2. It has better DPM than the KV2. It's more accurate than the KV2. It's so much fun. And this is why it's on my honorable mentions list. And finally, coming in at number 1 on my list, the most, like the one tank destroyer that you should have in your garage at all costs is the Hellcat. the T6 American Tank Destroyer, the Hellcat. This is not a tank destroyer. Whatever you may think, this is not a tank destroyer. This is a light tank with a tank destroyer gun. That's what this tank is. It's a light tank. It's not a tank destroyer. This is such a fun tank to play. It honestly, can we just appreciate how cool this tank looks and how sexy it looks, especially with this camouflage. It just looks so good. It looks so good. And the tank itself is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't have the most armor, so you're not going to bounce anything. But what it does have is an amazing power to weight ratio. It has 65 km/h top speed. Very, very quick tank. And the gun, 90mm gun, 3.4 second aim time, 0.345 dispersion. So it's not the most accurate thing in the world, but it does get its shots off very nicely. 2100 DPM, you can probably bump that up to about 2200 or 20, about just under 2300 DPM, right? 6 second aim time, 6 second reload, I should probably say. Now the pen, if you're running this with calibrated shells, which I'm going to do right now, let's go here. Calibrate shells. Boom. Done. Bob's your uncle. 189 mils of AP pen. 255 on your APCR and 49 on your HE. Which is more than enough to contest with most tanks at T7. So do keep in mind that's what you need. It also has 10 degrees of gun depression. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, you can snapshot in this tank on a ridgeline. Don't use your gun depression to try and bounce shots because you're not going to bounce anything. You use it to your advantage and your speed to get shots off quickly and effectively without getting hit yourself. And that's the important thing. And again, it does 240 alpha, which is quite nice for a 90mm gun. It is honestly, this is such a fun tank. This is my favorite T6 tank in the game. Apart from the KV2 and the KV1S, this is just such a fun tank to play. If you love light tanks, but you want something with a bit more oomph at T6, this is the one you gotta play, because this is basically a light tank. So much fun. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my top 5 must-have tank destroyers in Water Tanks Blitz. Hopefully this helped you understand why these tanks are in the order that I put them in, why I think not only are they my favorites, but I think they're worthy of being in that top 5 list. And if you disagree with me, because I know there's going to be some people that disagree with me, please let me know in the comments down below. Tell me. Put them in the comments. I want to hear your opinions. Let us know. It's a community post after all, because that's what community contributors do. They listen to the community and they have a chat. They give them their opinions and what they think is right and wrong, whatever, in terms of the game and, statistic wise, and, convey the information. And then of course they ask for feedback, which is what I'm doing. So I'm asking you, the player base, for feedback. If you think I said something wrong, please let me know in the comments down below. But before we end the video, I just want to have a look. So the AMX CDC and the Fiero. Good. Now there's some people on the EU server are not stupid enough to purchase the Fiero for a 10,000 gold. So good to know. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to let me know in the comments down below, again, what you think, and give me your opinions. Without further ado, look after yourselves, look after your friends and family. Peace in the Middle East. And as always, I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.